welcome to another episode of CxOTalk. And I am here with my co-host, Vala Afshar. Vala, how are you?
I'm doing well, Michael.
It's good to see you. And today we have two amazing and esteemed guests. We have Naomi Bloom, who is truly one of the most well-recognized and respected analysts and consultants in HR technology. Naomi, why don't you say hello?
Hi, Michael. Hi, Vala. It's nice to meet Vala for the first time. And great to be here.
And Naomi, just tell us briefly a little bit about your background.
Well, like so many brilliant people, I started out to be a nuclear physicist. Quickly discovered I wasn't brilliant enough. And the rest is history. I was a programmer and then project manager, built a lot of custom software. Time passed, and now I'm focused entirely, last 25 years, on HR technology.
And we're also here with an old friend, Nenshad Bardoliwalla, who is a veteran of both large companies and startups with analytics. And Nenshad, why don't you say hello and tell us a little bit about your background and what you're up to?
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone, and it's absolutely a pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me to the show, Vala and Michael. And I can think of no one I would rather spend time with than Miss Bloom, so it's an honor. I've been in the analytics space for about 15 years, both as a hands-on practitioner as well as someone who develops products. And I've been honored to work at great companies like Siebel and Hyperion and SAP, and have also been part of founding a couple of companies here in Silicon Valley. And it's a pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me.
Great. Well, this show, CxOTalk, is dedicated to exploring the new realities around CMOs, Chief Marketing Officers, and CIOs, Chief Information Officers, face. And of course, we hear terms like analytics and big data, which don't always have a very clear meaning, but we know that somehow it's important both to CMOs and to the CIO. So Nenshad, your background is very deep in analytics. So why don't you start and tell us a little bit about the history, give us just a brief history lesson, and tell us what's changing today. Why all this talk about big data and analytics? Why has it come to the fore so much?
Yeah, so that's a perfect question to start with. So a few hundred years ago, there were some dudes and dudettes called the Medicis, which we all learned about in our history classes. And during that time, double entry bookkeeping was started. And for the next few hundred years, people started doing double entry bookkeeping, and all was well, until people decided that it wasn't that efficient to have people actually doing this by hand. And thus, our enterprise software industry started to spring up. Naomi speaks on this much more eloquently than me. But we started to design systems that would automate business processes, like financials, like materials management, like payroll, where Naomi's an expert, etc. Well, no sooner than people started entering information into these systems, they decided that, wow, it'd be pretty cool to actually get information out, too. Maybe summarize some of this information, maybe be able to look at trends for what was happening. And thus, the BI and analytics industry was born from an enterprise software perspective. And so even as early as the mainframe days, you had people who were trying to get reports out of the systems that automated these transactions. And the analytics industry has really gone through the same phases as the transactional processes, from the mainframe era to the client-server era to more of the web and cloud era that we're in now. And what has changed, I think, is that the diversity of business processes has changed quite a bit because our whole society is becoming digital in every single aspect of what we do. So, 30 years ago, we started off by measuring general ledger trends. But now, on a device like this, and this is not an Android commercial, by the way, but on a device like this, you know where I've been over the last 5 or 6 days, God help you. You also know how long I've waited at the gas station, You also know how many steps I've walked in the last few days. And so what is happening is that the transformation in society, where all of our activity as humans is being digitized, is now translating into the enterprise world, where people are trying to exploit that information for the purposes of selling more products, of understanding their customer better, of understanding and predicting future behavior of people. So when people talk about, and I love these terms like big data, analytics, etc., because they're so broad as to be, virtually meaningless. But the idea that the digital exhaust of every activity that humans do, being able to capture that digital exhaust, mine it for information that could be helpful in not only commercial purposes, but improving the health of people, improving government activity, etc., is actually where analytics is going. And in my career, over the last 15 years, this is probably one of the most exciting times because everybody wants to get involved in analytics, right? Everyone is suddenly becoming an analytics expert. So it's a fun time.
Great. Vala, you're a CMO. Are you using the digital exhaust as Nenshad talks about it?
Well, I'm certainly exhausted with all the data that's coming my way. You hold up your smart device, your phone or tablet, and I just read 15% of the internet traffic is sourced from tablets and smartphones. And, I know within Enterasys, the average number of applications we have on our mobile devices is approaching 50 apps. Some of them business, some of them maybe not so much. But what I keep thinking about, and I would love, Naomi, and your input is, you have Clay Christensen who speaks to, all the data we have is from the past. To be successful, we need to develop theories about the future. So how does a CIO or CMO drowning in this ocean of data develop theories about how to best serve the employees and the customers?
I would say that there's a very close analogy in what we're discussing and garbage. For centuries, mankind built up garbage, and we piled it up, and we really didn't get a lot of value from it. And then we figured out that we could, if you will, mine that garbage for business value. But it took some really smart people to figure it out. To the rest of us, it just looked like garbage. And I fear that the same thing is happening with big data. We are very short on the human capability, company by company by company, to figure out for my company what would be the right analytics. Who needs to have that information? How can we get it to them in a form that they could actually understand it? Right. For years we talked about the fact that the world would run on software and there weren't going to be enough people to program all of it. Now we know that the world will run on analytics and there aren't enough people to understand, first of all, which analytics, let alone how to put it together. So I see as one of the challenges, and it was funny, I just by complete happenstance spent all of today until an hour ago with a CMO. And we had precisely this conversation. He's drowning in analytical opportunities, but does not have the right person available to say, in our business, the driver of business outcomes happens to be the average productivity of our sales force. That's the business we're in. So let's mine the data to understand why some salespeople are inherently more productive than others, and figure out how to clone them, how to magnify that behavior. It's a human resource management problem, as are almost all problems, and the HR community, in my view, needs to get right in front of this, because whether it's a CMO drowning, or it's the head of R&D drowning, or it's manufacturing, everybody's drowning, and we have not been growing that skill set in the quantities and capability that we need.
Right.
So the impact of the lack of skills, Nenshad, is that something that you're seeing as well, that this is becoming, that the lack of skills and is a significant impediment, I'm assuming, to the development of these types of systems, but to what extent is it impairing the effective use of this type of data, large data sets?
The latter is actually the more interesting question, because as long as I've been in this industry, we've had the promise of things like predictive modeling, algorithmic techniques that will tell you, shake the magic 8-ball and I'll tell you what your EPS is going to be. Which, by the way, if that actually worked, I would be on a boat somewhere, not doing that, right? So all the folks who say predictive analytics works, if they're still working, it don't work that good. But aside from that, I think the reality is that the real skills problem we have is actually the skills of the average business person to understand the output of analytical systems, to think analytically. So if you go to a business executive, and here we're talking about CMOs and CIOs, and how everything is becoming digital in the enterprise, if you go to the CMO and you said, look, I just ran a pro-bit regression, and it's telling me that this segment of our customer base is growing 30% faster than something else, if you say pro-bit regression, they're going to say, is that a medical problem? Most CMOs don't know what that is. But in order for us to be successful as a society in this digital world, and for CMOs and CIOs to be successful, they must develop that competence. And so I think that it's important for us to get the literacy of statistics and analysis into every high school and college graduate this planet produces, because they will not be successful in a world where there's such a huge discrepancy between those who can actually exploit information and those who cannot. And so I've mentioned this to Naomi, and I don't know if she agrees with me or not, but I think that we have a massive skills change that needs to take place in the workforce over the next 20 years to make everyone analytically savvy. Otherwise, folks will literally be left behind as entire industries are swept under.
The good news is that we have tools available that cost nothing. So
Naomi, speak up. I have to ask you, speak louder.
I'm sorry. I'm going to make a confession here in public. I'm a few years out of school, and my statistics course is very far in the rear view. So shortly, just a while back, I decided that I needed to first test my statistical memory and maybe do a little upskilling, a little refreshing. I went to Khan Academy. There are tests you can take which look at various aspects of statistical analysis. You can decide where you need a little help, and you can get that help for free.
Right.
Now, what more could anybody ask for? If they would take 15 minutes out of their day that they are now wasting watching reality TV, they too could get reskilled. And if they don't, they're not going to be employable at the levels we're talking about.
Right. Right. So it's funny. I just read a Harvard study that said 80% of the Fortune 500 companies are either investing in big data or planning to invest. Then I read recently in the Atlantic that in 2001, when you are a PhD engineering student, you had 60% graduation success, employment success after graduation. Last year, it was about 35% of PhDs in technical fields are finding work. I also read in MIT Sloan that the ideal data scientist is one that has PhD. In fact, right now, about 60% of the data scientists have advanced degrees. McKinsey is talking about, in the US alone, we're going to have 190,000 shortage in data scientists by 2018. So you have one study that says analytical, data-driven, engineered, advanced degree folks are having a tough time finding work. In another study, you're talking about a massive shortage. So, in your opinion, which is it? And can Khan Academy and massive open online courses and some of the free courses that are available give you the edge that you need to be able to drive business intelligence in the enterprise?
We call it business intelligence because it means applying mathematical models to a business. And that implies you could actually walk and talk at the same time, go into a room with business people and communicate. I think one problem we have is that there's some very brilliant people and very highly educated people who are incapable of ferreting out and understanding the business process that they're trying to study and model. That's one part of the problem. Another part of the problem is that brilliant people come to this country to study, get first-grade degrees, and we don't allow them to stay. So we have an immigration issue part of the problem. And the third part of the problem is money. So if I can make more money in a startup with Nenshad than I can going into a major corporate setting, and I have one of these rare and desirable academic preparations, what am I going to do? I've got huge college loans to pay off. I'm with Nenshad.
Yeah, but but Nenshad was saying earlier that the problem here is the lack of skills in the general working business population, and Nenshad's nodding his head. But honestly, Nenshad, just not to be awkward here, but of the four of us, you're the guy who's building these fancy analytic tools. Mm-hmm. And so why aren't you doing, if I may be so bold, why aren't you doing a better job making these tools easier to use for people like Vala, who is a CMO and is not a data scientist, or people like me who just want to get the job done?
It's a great...
Nenshad, we need your help.
Yeah, Nenshad, you before you had those little devil ears, maybe it's time.
And I'm a double E. I mean, I used to be very analytical.
Yeah, now you see the devil ears.
I
Okay.
represent the evil hegemony of enterprise software. Which is
yes, thank you. So what about it?
Yeah. So I think there is a very serious point in there, which is that the tools, the technologies, the capabilities that we have built in enterprise software are also undergoing a really dramatic transformation. What is that transformation? It is the move from structuring systems to behave in a way that is consistent with the way the machine needs to operate, to structuring systems in a way that humans cognitively process information. Okay, so 30 years ago, 20 years ago, people would do things like say, well, I can't fit all of these elements on 3 screens, so I'm going to jam them on 1. Or my computer only allows 8 character fields, so everything you describe has to have 8 characters. Okay? And we wound up building software that made the machine happy, or what the machine could handle, without ever really thinking about the human factors aspects of it. And that software has been wildly successful economically, but the adoption rates are not exactly world-class. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is that is actually changing. People like me and other folks in startups and any company now have access to more computational power than almost any of us could actually absorb. And so now what you are seeing is that techniques in visualization, techniques in data discovery, techniques in text mining are becoming so available to the average person that we are starting to have a new generation of enterprise software and consumer software that is much easier to use and much more likely to be able to give people success, because we now don't have to think about the computational aspects of what we're doing as much as we have to think about what does the user need, how do I communicate that information to the user, and I can actually test whether they're getting value by instrumenting the system and producing data that allows me to do that.
So Naomi, he's telling us that actually the vendors are, at least some of the vendors are getting better with this. Do you agree?
I do, and in fact, at least in my space, in human resource management.
Talk loud, Naomi.
I'm sorry. in human resource management, we've actually gone a couple of steps further because we've been studying this area for a very long time. And the key thing we're trying to accomplish is to drive business results. In order to do that, we need a lot of decision makers to make better decisions because we are pumping the results of analytics to the decision maker point of sale. At the moment when they're going to make a decision, we inform them in a way that helps them make a better decision. It could be a higher decision. It could be how to allocate scarce compensation so that their best performers continue performing very well. It could be a decision in succession planning, who to bet on for the future.
Right.
So it's not just mining the data and presenting it in accessible ways, it's pumping it right to the point of sale. We are doing that. There's a number of vendors doing it and doing it very well. But is there room for further activity? Absolutely.
Let me just jump on that because I think there's a really important point that even goes beyond that, and that is if you give something to the person at the point where they need to make the decision, how do you actually get buy-in? And my belief is that if you can correlate the decisions that people make to business outcomes, people will start to care about analytics. So if you can point to Joe, the cashier, who suddenly has become the star, the belle of the ball, so to speak, because they are able to actually process more transactions, or at a Best Buy, able to sell more product. And it's because of analytical decision support that we provided them. And we can prove that. And we can even instruct people and say, you know what? The other folks in your situation usually offer the DVD player. But you decided to go with your gut and offer them the phone, and they didn't take the package, right? So I think that the notion of systems that learn, systems that give people feedback very quickly that says, okay, you're the human, you made the decision, but by the way, 7 out of 10 people who make this decision chose differently than you, and they're doing better than you. Well, suddenly people are going to start to care a lot more, and I think it becomes much more relevant to them versus the abstractness of the algorithms or visualization, independent of the context of the business outcomes that people are incented towards trying to achieve.
Right. So, Nenshad, do you think that a social business, enterprise and companies that are, for example, using crowdsourcing to gain the genius of the crowd, or more importantly, gamification concepts, where you can not only monitor the performance and benchmark the individuals within the line of business, but also provide almost real-time recognition and incentive awards? Are these companies that are using Enterprise 2.0 technology to again, take big data, convert it to big insight, to big action, and then ultimately big value to their end customers?
I think that's where it's moving towards. I think we're in the early stages of understanding gamification and how these approaches actually work in terms of getting people to buy into the systems and getting, I think reward systems can be very effective, but to make them sticky, they have to have long-standing behavioral change that drive people to not just want to get more stars on the refrigerator, but actually to change their motivation for why they do the activity in the first place, which is something Naomi can speak to much more eloquently than me. But the answer is yes. If you digitize every aspect of a person's behavior and then incent them for the right activities that lead to the right outcomes. Right. Hey, you should take 3 more online courses because you're really doing well and we want you to get these skills. Right. I absolutely think that there is a play there for making people more incentive to want to do the right thing by aligning their personal goals with the outcomes that the organization is looking for.
One of the areas,
Naomi, what do you see the HR technology vendors doing around this aspect? Do you see them doing anything to support the enterprise in terms of diffusing these skills through the organization, or is this sort of outside their bailiwick?
There's a couple of different things going on. So first of all, one of the big expense items that all larger companies have is healthcare benefits. And we know societally that we're drowning in healthcare costs. So there are some very interesting experiments going on using gamification, using big data to big insight to behavioral change, where we are engaging the workforce. Sometimes it comes through an employer, sometimes it comes through the healthcare carrier, but we're engaging the workforce in ways that are trying to incent behaviors that are healthy based on the data that we have, and then rewards based on those healthier behaviors. So lower healthcare insurance costs for people that lose some weight, lower healthcare insurance costs for people who may have diabetes, who are in fact doing the kinds of behaviors that reduce the likelihood of emergency treatment. So we're seeing some of that. We're also seeing, in a dummied down way, I don't know if I can use that term on such a highfalutin show, but nonetheless, in a dummied down way, we are seeing a whole set of analytics brought to the HR community that are really, they're very generalized, they're not specific to a company, but they begin to give people a feel for the power of this kind of thinking. Because unless, it's very hard to improve your hire people for more analytical mindset, more analytical skill, if you don't know what you're looking for. So part of what we have to do is educate the educators. We have to educate the HR policy people. I wish that SHRM were doing a brilliant job of this, because at least in the U.S., that's where a lot of HR people hang out, but I don't think they are. I can dare say that. I don't think the universities are going to fix this, because so many people are already working. It's not a software problem.
Right.
We can do a lot in software to bring the data forward, to analyze the data, to suggest action, to provide that feedback loop. But the right action differs by company, and you have to figure it out in a specific situation. If we just do it in a generalized way, the chances of hiring the wrong people faster goes up.
False positive.
Yeah.
Naomi, what I love is how active you are in terms of your social networks. I see your tweets on a daily basis. Your blogs are wonderful. In today's connected knowledge-sharing economy, does HR need to be social? Can you possibly achieve full potential in terms of recruiting the best talent into your business if your human resources function is not social?
No. Simple answer is no. The function needs to be social, and your people need to be social. Who the hell wants to come to work or even think about working for a company that's 10 years behind the times? The best people won't go to work there. And that's true not just in social behavior. It's true in the technology that's made available. Imagine you are a bright young recruit, and you are interviewing with a number of different companies. And the first place you show up, they haven't done their homework on LinkedIn. They don't even know about your social profile. The person interviewed, you studied them, but they didn't go to the trouble. They didn't show you the courtesy of studying you.
Bravo.
You're not going to be too impressed. So yes, not just the HR department, but the function, the whole process of bringing people in, moving them through, and getting work done has to be done in a social way today.
You know, Vala's got this crazy thing going on where he's hiring he's hiring somebody to be, what's that title?
A social strategist for evangelist in marketing.
So he's hiring a social strategist, evangelist, whatever that is, I'm not sure. but whatever it is, he was telling me it's a 6-figure salary, and Vala, you're not collecting any you're not accepting resumes on this, right? This is all being done over Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, so I decided to have a 30-day recruitment process where I'm bringing a senior marketeer. It is a 6-figure position, and I'm not accepting resumes. Candidates apply through Twitter using a specific hashtag, social CV, and then our human resources, our marketing, our product management teams, there's a cross-functional team, and they're researching the candidate's digital footprint. in terms of publication, blogs, Pinterest, Google+, Twitter, Facebook activity to determine their experience and expertise. And at the end of the process, we'll select a few candidates and we'll offer them a position. But it's definitely a recruitment process that's abandoning the traditional paper resume. I certainly, for this role, I don't need a couple of pages to tell me how successful you are building a social digital footprint. So, I would love to have your feedback regarding this process.
Well, there's a bunch of regulatory stuff that you don't want to run afoul of. So hopefully, in the midst of all of this very creative and totally appropriate process, somebody is paying attention to that, lest you discover that you can't hire anybody because you are now in court 80% of your time. That is a real challenge. The regulatory environment around labor practices and so on in the U.S., even worse, other countries have not caught up with what we can do with technology. So what sounds entirely sensible, if it produces nothing but white guys, problem. If it produces nothing but very, very young, very, very old, you have to really be aware of those rules, which presumably your HR people are aware of. Presumably you've gone to the trouble of writing a job description that incorporates these considerations.
Yes. Yep.
But I would say go for it, because to hire anybody that did not meet that profile, they're not going to be able to do the job.
Right.
Vala, how's that working out for you, by the way, so far?
It's wonderful. I mean, I can't tell you how pleased I am. The recruitment process ends Monday, so we've had 30 days. Wide spectrum of candidates, all are wonderful. Our shortlist is down to 20. So,
wow.
But what's amazing is that when I look at the number of how enthusiastic these folks are applying, and how they're crowdsourcing support, and it's going to be a wonderful process. I have no doubt, based on the short list of 20 candidates, that we will have an amazing talent join our company, and if it's as successful as I'm hoping, I may just abandon resumes altogether.
There's something else about what you're doing. There's no reason why you might not find the very best person living in Bulgaria, or living in South Africa,
exactly,
or living almost anywhere.
Exactly.
And if their role is a digital one, so they're not on the production line at a factory where they physically have to show up, you might as well. You've now recruited on an international basis,
yes, without
the cost of a global search. So not only are you getting the best and the brightest, but you are also opening it up globally at a very low cost.
Right.
And somebody will do the background check.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's pretty interesting. Nenshad, so I have a couple of questions for you. And I think you might need your little horns again there. There we go.
We're getting used to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I am certain there are people viewing this webcast who will say, wow, that's just redundant. I can see the horns.
Yeah, finally he's coming out. Exactly. So as somebody who is building, let's get back to hardcore analytics for a moment here. As somebody who is building these systems, what advice can you give to software designers to make these systems easier to use for ordinary people? And what are the kinds of things that you're doing? That's part A of my question. And part B is, now you can take off the things for part B. Thank you. When he's in the role of an enterprise vendor, he's got to wear, But now, for this part of the question, what advice would you?
Triangle. Not just about the vendor, Michael.
Well, and here we go, exactly. And so what advice would you give to the customers, to the enterprise buyers, when they are looking at these advanced analytics systems to buy the right thing and to make sure that it works? So put on your horns and take the vendor point of view, and then put on your angel thing and and take the customer point of view.
Okay, so I'll start off as the devil. Of course, one might argue that me actually putting the angel thing on is completely out of the question, but we'll get.
We
there.
would argue it, but this is, it's theater. It's a costume.
That's fine. So in terms of how things need to change from a vendor side, right? The complexity behind what actually goes into a Google search is absolutely mind-boggling. The complexity that goes into packet switching, the kind of which Vala and his company probably know very well, is extremely complex. The complexity that it takes to run the Amazon Web Services cloud is extremely complex. But you know what? The first day that I told my dad, hey, there's this thing called Facebook, and he's like, yeah, I'm not interested, but I'll put pictures of the kids on there so you can see my 3 daughters. He's like, okay, and within 15 minutes, he's using it. Everybody in the world has access to the entire, pretty much the entire digital corpus of everything that's happened on this planet through a Google search box that is a single box in the UI that hasn't changed in 12 years. So I think that we, and certainly this is a lesson that I've had to reteach myself and remind myself multiple times, but it is so tempting as technologists to try to put the coolest, whiz-bang, dashboards and dials and sliders and all these other things, but they don't enhance usability. It's really what is the most minimalistic way and natural way that a person wants to be able to ask a question, to wade through the data, to make some comments about the data, to share it somewhere else. And I think that a lot of the inspiration for many of us in the enterprise today is coming from the consumer world, because there is no training manual for Facebook. There is no training manual for Twitter. There is no training manual for Amazon.com. I mean, Amazon.com is one of the most complex purchasing systems on the planet. Underneath Amazon.com, they have taxonomies and ontologies about the different products and how they roll up, and do you want this type of garden hoe or not? However, for the user, they just type into a search box, or they say, no, I don't want the Kindle version, I want the book version, and it's very simple. So I think the notion that simplicity, really, really simple systems exposed to the user with extreme complexity under the cover is where the software industry is going. And so the inspiration that we take, whether it's my company or lots of other companies here in the Valley and elsewhere, is really around how do you expose the most simple thing possible and make the computer do the hard work that it's actually good at.
Great.
Don't make me think about it.
So now put on your angel, and that wasn't so bad. Maybe there you go. And now give advice to users, and then Naomi will hit you up for advice as well.
Yeah. So from a user perspective, there are gross misconceptions in every category of enterprise software, including analytics. Okay. First of all, you have to know what you're looking for. Who is the user? What do they do in their day-to-day process? What are they trying to accomplish? Anybody who tells you that one size fits all from an analytics perspective or any other perspective is not telling, I think, the full story. If you're a marketing analyst and you're trying to work on figuring out campaign segmentation, there's some really good products that help you with that. But don't then go and try to make that product useful for an FP&A person, because usually it won't suit that use case.
Right.
So understanding the role, how frequently do they need information? What is their level of technical expertise? What do they understand about how computers work? You need to be very ruthless in understanding exactly the demands of your user, because to be truthful, the analytics industry has had very poor success rates from a customer perspective. I can't tell you how many companies I've visited, and mea culpa, by the way, I've built some of these products too, so it's not like I'm blaming, hey, all the other guys build bad products, but Nenshad doesn't. No, I've probably built some bad products too. But the net is that from a customer perspective, if you aren't very precise about what people need and exactly how they're going to use the software, instead of today's enterprise software buying process, although this is changing of, we're just going to bundle everything with a big ELA license, and we've got everything you need, most of which stays on the shelf. I think that model has run its course, and it's really time for people to be very precise. And there's never been more variety in the offerings in the market than there is today. So people can take very low risk approach to actually trying these technologies out. They pay a subscription license, etc. See if they like the product, and if it meets their needs, great. It will proliferate. If it doesn't, they can move on to something else.
Great.
One size fits all doesn't work.
And Naomi, you advise pretty much all the major HCM vendors. So what advice would you give to them regarding the design of their software to make analytics easier to use and more accessible to a broader base of users?
Funny you should ask.
And talk loudly, Naomi.
I'm going to talk very loudly. I'm the queen of HR technology.
That's awesome.
All right.
For the last 3 or 4 years, I have done a lot of work that's really trying to bring analytics directly into business process. Because I am persuaded that, except for the folks for whom analytics is what they do, and there are people like that in every company, but for the average employee, the average manager, the average person just trying to get work done, they need the analytics to appear. Now Nenshad is showing up with a tiara.
Oh,
all right. I think we're losing it, folks. They need the power of analytics to present itself when they are trying to do something. So, for example, on Amazon, when I go to Amazon to buy a book, that's the business event. I am trying to buy a book. Amazon, based on a lot of very exotic stuff going on behind the mirror, says, the people who bought that book also bought these other 3. Or we see that you bought these 12 books by author X. Did you know they have a new one coming out? By using a lot of analytics that I don't have to know anything about, but bringing it to me where I live, where I'm at, I'm getting the full benefit, and they're getting more books sold. So if we take that example and we put it in any business process, for example, in marketing, one of the things marketing is trying to do is drive qualified prospects, people with money, people with interest, people with signing authority, etc., to their sales process. Ideally, a person-free sales process. Go to the website, sign up, pay your money, you're done. Well, in order to do that, I have to reach out and grab that person where they're thinking about the kinds of products that I sell. Maybe, shoes are a great example. It turns out when I go to Amazon, it presents me with shoe ads. Do you get shoe ads? Probably not.
Oh.
Right.
Because you've not been buying enough shoes. And I don't even have to buy them on Amazon. If I buy shoes on, I won't mention another website, quite high-end shoes, the next time I show up at Amazon, there's little shoe ads for that brand. Now, I don't know how they do that, but it doesn't matter. It works, and I can buy it. I think that's where we need to get to.
Simplicity. That's the message then.
Yes.
So Naomi, I think I know the story of that hat, but you need to tell us about that hat.
Oh, the crown?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, if you last longer than everybody else, if you just outlast them, you become a queen. And being a queen is good.
That works. And Vala, I think we're going to need to wrap up in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Vala, we need to let you have some closing thoughts here.
Yeah, no, it's incredible insight. I'm just thinking as you're talking about predictive analytics and simplicity and how to best serve the enterprise. Is it fair to expect CIO trying to maintain the infrastructure and enable and empower the other lines of business, or the CMO who's trying to, as Naomi said, qualified leads and marketing automation and be outward facing and creative? And you keep hearing this other chief title, chief digital officer popping up more and more. With all this amount of data that's being produced, do we need a chief data officer, chief science officer to really enable the different lines of business? Can a traditional CIO, CMO successfully develop this culture of analytics and data?
So I think that they must develop that competency, or in the next 18 months, they're going to be doing something different.
Wow.
I think that every single executive role in a company, you're the head of supply chain, you're the head of marketing, you're the CIO. If you don't get, and not because it helps me sell more product or anything like that, I really truly believe that every executive from a business perspective has to get some degree of analytic competency into their organization, because that is the expectation that forward-thinking CEOs are going to have of the people that they bring into the organization. So, Vala, you made a statement, is it fair to assume that these people need to get that? I don't know if it's fair or not, but as Naomi has said to me on more than one occasion, hey kid, life ain't fair. So if you need to learn about digital marketing or digital supply chain or IT innovation, you got to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Naomi, you want to have the last word?
Yes, I do. I don't think titles matter all that much, and I'm sort of annoyed by the proliferation of cutesy titles. I think what matters is there's a body of work to be done. We divide it up into lumps, and who's ever in charge of a lump has got to have the right skills to do it.
Bravo.
The lump that has to do with marketing, maybe 20 years ago, required a different set of skills.
Yes.
Today it requires analytical skills, an understanding of data, an understanding of social. I mean, there's a whole set of things that are expected in a marketing executive today that might not have been the case 20 years ago. The same thing is true of a CIO. 20 years ago, they ran the data center. I mean, that was a big part of what they did.
Sure.
Today, with rare exception, except for the very, very largest company, why is anybody building a data center? So their skill set has really changed. This isn't new. This has been going on the entire length of my career. 10 years from now, who knows what we'll be talking about? Communicating with space aliens, perhaps. But that skill set keeps moving. And it is a wise individual who elongates their career by continuing to move with the needed skills. Otherwise, you will not be happy working as long as I am.
So,
superb advice.
So if I summarize this long and interesting conversation, in a sense, it seems to me it all comes down to, from the vendor side, build your products so that they're much simpler. And you guys didn't say it like this, but I'll say it. Get your ego out of your product and understand how your users are going to use those products. And on the buyer side, upgrade your skills, because there's no substitute for that. And you can't rely strictly on the other guy. You have to do it yourself. So how's that as a summary? And Nenshad, I see you're back to your halo there.
I want everyone to leave with the right impression of me.
There you go. So, Vala, once again, it's great doing this with you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
You guys, you can tell we're in the same room over here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
you.
A pleasure.
And I want to thank Naomi Bloom, who is genuinely and truly an icon in the HR technology world.
Absolutely.
And Nenshad Bardoliwalla, who has written a big, thick book on enterprise performance management and has worked at big companies and is currently at a startup that is in stealth, right? Stealth is the right term?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, thank you both, and wish everybody for watching. Have a great day. And next week, we're going to be joined, Vala and I will be joined by Paul Greenberg, who is not only the godfather of soul, people don't realize that. People don't know that, but he is popularly known, and rightfully so, as the godfather of CRM. And so next week is Paul Greenberg. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.